Welcome to English Listen and Learn. I'm Ben, and I'm really excited to jump into this deep dive with you today. We're going to be talking about something that I know a lot of language learners struggle with, the fear of making mistakes.
And I'm Anna. I'm here to help us explore those mistakes and why they're actually a really important part of becoming fluent.
It is kind of funny, isn't it? We spend all this time in language classes trying to get everything perfect. But what if I told you that getting things wrong could be the key to actually making real progress?
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Like how kids learn their first language.
Right.
I mean, they make a ton of mistakes as they're learning.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And nobody expects them to speak perfectly right from the beginning. And actually, that same idea applies to learning any language,
Right.
really. It's like learning to play an instrument. You wouldn't expect to just pick up a guitar or a piano and play like a concert pianist right away.
Exactly. You'd start with those basics. You'd make a lot of mistakes. And over time, you'd get better.
Yeah. And it's the same with language learning. Those mistakes that you make, they're not signs that you're failing. They're actually signs that you're trying new things. You're pushing yourself to use new language and incorporate new elements into your speech.
It's like a baby taking those first steps before they can actually walk properly.
So what you're saying is making mistakes actually means that I'm on the right track.
Exactly. Each mistake that you make is like a little signpost. It's pointing to what you need to work on next.
It's like those little arrows in a video game that show you which way to go.
I like that. So for example, let's say you're trying to use the past tense and you say, I go to the store yesterday. Obviously that's a mistake, but it shows that you're trying to use the past tense.
Right. So even though the sentence isn't perfect, it still shows that you're understanding something new.
Yes, exactly. And it shows that you're engaging with the language. You're trying to put the pieces together. And then that's where a teacher or a language partner can really help, because they can provide feedback and they can help you understand the correct way to say it.
So it's not just about making the mistake. It's about then getting feedback and using that feedback to understand what I need to do better next time.
Right. It's like having a coach who watches what you're doing and then gives you feedback to improve.
Okay, I get that. But what about the times when we feel embarrassed about our mistakes? I think that's a real problem for a lot of language learners. They're afraid of sounding silly.
Oh, yeah, I totally get that. I mean, we all want to sound smart and competent, but you have to remember that everyone makes mistakes.
Even native speakers.
Yeah,
Right? I mean, I've definitely heard native English speakers make mistakes sometimes.
exactly. Language is complicated, and we're all going to make mistakes sometimes. The important thing is not to let those mistakes stop us from speaking at all.
So how do we get over that fear? How do we keep practicing even when we're feeling self-conscious?
I think it helps to look at people who have achieved great things and realize that they also made mistakes along the way.
People like J.K. Rowling, for example.
Hmm.
I mean, she was rejected so many times before she finally got Harry Potter published.
It's incredible to think about how much courage that must have taken.
It really shows that mistakes and setbacks are just a normal part of life.
Yeah, and that no one achieves great things without facing some challenges along the way.
And speaking of challenges, another amazing story is Arnold Schwarzenegger's.
Moving to the United States without knowing much English and then becoming a huge movie star and even the governor of California.
His story really shows how important determination is and how we can learn and grow even when things are difficult.
He didn't let his accent or his early struggles with English hold him back.
Both of those stories are really inspiring. It seems like the main takeaway here is that we shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. We should see them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly. It's about changing how we think about mistakes and seeing them as steps on our path to fluency.
Okay, that sounds great. But how do we actually do that? How do we start thinking about mistakes in a more positive way?
That's a great question, and that's what we're going to talk about next. We'll discuss some practical tips and techniques that you can use to get over your fear of making mistakes and start speaking English with more confidence.
This is getting really interesting. I can't wait to hear more. So we've seen how people like J.K. Rowling and Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't let the fear of making mistakes stop them.
Yeah, they embrace those challenges and use them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly. And now let's talk about some things that you can do to do the same thing in your own journey of learning English.
Well, the first thing, and I think the most important thing, is to just change your mindset.
Okay.
So instead of thinking about mistakes as failures, try to see them as opportunities to learn.
Oh, okay. Like that growth mindset stuff.
Exactly. It's about believing that you can actually improve your abilities through hard work and dedication.
So instead of getting upset when I make a mistake,
Yeah.
I should try to think about it as a chance to learn and get better.
Exactly. It's like turning that voice in your head that says, oh no, you messed up, into a voice that says, okay, What can I learn from this?
I like that.
Yeah.
But, it's not always easy to do that all by yourself.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely easier when you're in a supportive environment.
So you mean like finding friends or teachers or other language partners who are also learning English?
Exactly. People who understand what you're going through and who won't judge you for every little mistake.
Right. Makes sense.
And there are some great online communities too,
Oh, really?
like Hello Talk or Tandem. These are platforms where you can connect with people from all over the world who are also learning English.
It's like having a safety net.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can try new things, you can experiment, you might even make a big mistake. But you know that there are people there to support you and help you get back on track.
Okay. But even with a safety net, starting anything new can be scary. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out on their English learning journey?
I think it's important to start small and build your confidence slowly. You don't have to jump into those really difficult conversations right away. You can start with things that feel easier, like talking to yourself or recording yourself speaking, or practicing with close friends.
I remember when I was learning Spanish, I used to just talk to myself in Spanish about what I was doing, like narrating my day.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it felt silly at first, but it really helped.
And don't forget to celebrate those small victories.
Yeah.
Like if you successfully ordered your coffee in English, that's amazing. Give yourself a high five.
I like that.
It's about recognizing your progress and keeping that motivation going.
So we've talked about mindset and environment and starting small. What about actually learning from our mistakes?
Mhm.
How do we make sure that we're not making the same mistakes over and over again?
That's a great question. One thing you can do is ask for feedback from your teacher or from native speakers.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask them to correct you. And even more importantly, ask them to explain why they made that correction.
So it's not just about memorizing the right way to say something.
Mhm.
It's about understanding why it's right.
Exactly. And another helpful technique is to keep a mistake journal.
A mistake journal.
Yeah. So whenever you make a mistake, write it down in your journal, along with the correct way to say it and maybe a little explanation.
So it's kind of like a personalized study guide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you look back at your mistake journal regularly, you'll probably start to see patterns, and you'll be able to avoid making those same mistakes again.
Okay, I like that. So we've talked about mindset environment, starting small, and seeking feedback. Is there anything else we can do to overcome that fear of making mistakes and become more confident English speakers?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to practice as much as possible.
Yeah, practice makes perfect.
Right. It's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you'll get.
But sometimes it's hard to find the time to practice.
I know, but there are actually lots of ways to fit practice into your daily life.
Like what?
Well, there are apps like Duolingo or Babbel. You could find a language partner online, or you could even just try thinking in English for a few minutes each day.
Those are good ideas.
Hmm.
And, it's important to remember that everyone makes mistakes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, even native English speakers make mistakes sometimes.
Of course, language is always changing and evolving. There's always something new to learn.
So it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah. The important thing is to embrace the process and have fun with it.
And sometimes you can even laugh about your mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember one time I was at a restaurant and I accidentally told the waiter that I was very delicious instead of very full. Yeah, we both laughed about it, and I never made that mistake again.
That's a great story.
It shows that learning a language doesn't have to be super serious. You can have fun with it.
Exactly. And remember, even those awkward moments are actually valuable learning experiences.
Because they help us to remember the correct way to say things.
Exactly. So we've talked about a lot of different strategies to help us embrace those mistakes.
Yeah, we have. But is there actually any scientific evidence that shows that making mistakes can actually help us learn better?
Yeah, there's a whole area of research on something called errorful learning.
Errorful learning.
Yeah, and studies have shown that when we make mistakes and then we get corrected, it actually helps us remember things better.
Really? So messing up can actually make me learn better?
Yeah, it sounds kind of strange, but
Yeah.
it makes sense. When you make a mistake and then you learn the right way to say something, it creates a stronger memory.
So like my brain is saying, hey, pay attention. This is important.
Exactly. And it's not just about avoiding mistakes, it's about using those mistakes as a way to learn more effectively.
Okay, I see. And is there anything else?
Yeah, there's more. Making mistakes can actually help us become more resilient.
More resilient. What does that mean?
Well, there was a study in the Journal of Educational Psychology, and they found that students who saw their mistakes as opportunities to learn They were more persistent, and they got better results.
Oh, that makes sense.
Oh.
I guess if we're too afraid of making mistakes, we're never going to try new things or push ourselves to improve.
Exactly. And we need to get out of our comfort zone if we want to really grow and learn.
So mistakes are kind of like lifting weights at the gym. Right.
Yeah, I like that analogy. The more you challenge yourself, the stronger you become.
Okay. So mistakes can help us learn,
Hmm.
and they can make us more resilient. Anything else?
Yeah, one more thing. Making mistakes helps us develop something called metacognitive skills.
Metacognitive skills. What are those?
It's a fancy word, but it basically means thinking about how we think.
Oh, okay.
So when we make a mistake, it makes us stop and think about how we're learning, what we're doing wrong, and how we can do better.
So we become more aware of our own learning process.
Exactly. And that helps us to improve our communication skills over time.
Wow. So making mistakes really does have a lot of benefits.
It does. It helps us learn better. It helps us become more resilient, and it helps us to become better thinkers.
I'm starting to see mistakes in a whole new light now.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's amazing how something that we usually think of as negative can actually be so helpful.
So what's the takeaway here? What should our listeners remember?
I think the most important thing is to remember that mistakes are a natural part of learning. Don't let the fear of making mistakes stop you from reaching your full potential.
That's great advice.
Yeah,
And remember, everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers.
it's true. So don't be afraid to go out there and speak English, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
And who knows? Maybe you'll even have a funny story to tell about it later.
That's right. Now, before we finish up, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
Think back to a time when you learned something new because you made a mistake. How did that experience change the way you think?
That's a great question for everyone to consider. Thanks for listening, everyone, and happy learning.
Thanks for watching. Until next time.